Everybody wants it. Got it. Makes you want to bring it on home.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of our series of conversations on Black women in the workplace. Now, at Digify Africa, we pride ourselves in being a company driven by Black women in South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria. So, these conversations are really important to us as we continue to challenge ourselves to do business differently, to really build an environment that is not only supportive of Black women, but also encourages us to keep reaching new heights in our careers. Today, we are looking at the notion of the angry Black woman and really busting the stereotype that often paints us as bad tempered, hostile, and overly aggressive. Today, I am joined by three women who are kicking ass and unapologetic about it. Firstly, let me introduce fellow colleague, Digify Africa's Senior Project Manager, Luleka Mosi. Hi, Luleka, how are you doing?
Kagaza, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Awesomeness. We also are joined by Malebo Sipodi, who is an author, development worker, and social commenter on identity and gender issues. Hey, Malebo, how are you doing?
Hi, Kakaza, how are you? So happy to be here.
It is good to see you again. Thank you so much for coming through. And lastly, we have Kovini Moodley, who is a philanthropist, activist, and CEO of Boss Babe South Africa. And she is our final guest for today. Hi, Kovini, how are you?
Hi, Kakaza. I'm really good. Thank you so much for having me on this platform.
Awesomeness. Ladies, thank you so much for making time to speak to me today. Hopefully, we might be joined by Nolwazi Tusini, who is a journalist, gender activist, and speaker. But as we know, we are busy ladies, and so is she. So she is currently running workshops right now. So she might pop in for a bit. But if not, it's all right. We will continue going. So, Malebo, as you can tell behind me, I'm a lover of books. And you, my dear, are a published author. And I found a quote in your book, Misbehave, which I thought would be really, really good for us to kick things off on, right? So the quote here says, when you disrupt the existing conditions and refuse to accept anything less than what you know you are worth, you start making those who oppress you so uncomfortable that they will try anything to discredit you. Yo, this life is deep. Tell me more about that moment when you made that realization. Like, what was happening in life that made that statement so true for you?
Thank you so much. thank you, first of all, for loving our work and for having the book and for using it today to start off. I do not take this for granted, you know. It's a lot of love that's going on. So to answer your question, I think this moment was a culmination of many moments, right, that built up to the specific point that you're asking about. But I joined the corporate sector like in the early 2000s, just for context. And I'd learned early on in my life that, you know, as a Black girl growing up and as a Black woman, there's a kind of like positionality that the world or society or systems places you in. And there's a way that the world expects you to show up. And it was very evident as well in the way that I was treated versus the people around me were treated. So I learned very early that for me to be taken seriously, for me to assert myself, I needed to work hard. You know, I needed to constantly prove myself. And so when I joined the corporate sector, one of the things that's interesting, and Viola Davis actually quoted Toni Morrison when she said, whenever a Black woman, and obviously this is a Black woman, is introduced in a story, innovation, or rather like innovation stops, right? Imagination stops. And what steps in is a stereotype. So when a Black woman is introduced in a story, she's not given her humanity, she's not explored in her fullness. There's already like tropes and gazes and stereotypes that are placed that define who she is. And this is what I found when I joined the corporate. What was fascinating for me is the vested interest in managing my behavior, you know, in the ways that I should show up in the workplace because I'm a Black woman. And, you know, there were always these subtleties that existed in terms of my place in the corporate sector and the way that I needed to behave in order for them to accept me. So there were essentially a stereotype that was built, a certain kind of trope that was built for me to belong in so that they can accept me. And this was like the stereotype of the token Black woman, right? As opposed to the stereotype that they feared. So whichever way I showed up, I was marred by stereotypes and gazes and tropes. And I remember how they used to manage my behavior would be through, for example, sending me a mentor because, you know, clearly being a Black woman who joins, you know, I don't come with my own skills. I don't come with my own experience. I'm constantly learning. I'm infantilized. And so they brought in a mentor. And I remember this mentor kept on telling me the company has great plans for me. They see great potential in me, and the way that I need to achieve whatever it is that they have in store for me is I need to behave in a certain way, right? I need to be strategic in the ways that I bring up issues. And I remember one day we were sitting in a conference, not a conference, a boardroom. I'm in the middle of a conference. We were sitting in a boardroom, and there were many issues that would come up in the corporate sector, in the company that I was working in, that were not okay with me. I couldn't deal with the injustices that I was seeing. And I didn't understand how the companies could get away with a lot of these things, right? And so I remember I would bring up all these issues all the time. But I remember a specific incident. We were sitting in the boardroom and it was a meeting, and I brought up an issue. And I remember this white man leaning back, and he started whistling and he rolled his eyes, and then he was like, "Oh boy." And when he said, "Oh boy," it seemed like he was opening the door to say to everybody, "Here we go. Here's this girl. Here's this Black woman. Get ready. Here's this angry Black woman about to erupt." And I remember when I brought up my issues, and listen, hey, I was calm. I spoke in a very assertive way, but because I think a lot of them at that time were not used to seeing a Black woman who's calm, who is assertive, who speaks. I don't know what was whatever it is that was informing, the stereotypes that exist in their lives. that whatever it is that I did, that's how they analyzed me. And I remember one of them saying to me, you have to calm down. You don't have to bring emotions into this, right? And this is what always happens, is that you are gaslighted to believe that, whenever it is that you're assertive, you're opinionated, this equals a kind of trope that you're an angry Black woman, you're aggressive, you have a chip on your shoulder. So there's no logic in whatever it is that you're saying, and so in this way, there's no winning because nobody listens to you. And I remember asking them, so when we were laughing, when we began this meeting, were we not being emotional, right? When we are sad in the meeting because of something comes up, are we not being emotional? Why is it that when I bring certain things up, then the emotional conversation comes in? So these were the things that I was dealing with in the corporate space. And I remember constantly, like I said, they were vested in policing, in managing my behavior, because I had to be grateful because I was chosen to be part of this group, and they were making a space for me at the table. And this is what I needed to aspire to be a person, who makes it at the table, to look at other people and say, look at me. So that moment when I realized that my humanity is not afforded in this space, and I'm being gaslighted, I'm being shamed, I decided that I'm going to use this as a power, because at the end of the day, people calling me an angry Black woman, it's meant to gaslight and shame me. But honestly, we live in a society, in a world where there's a lot to be angry about. And when I take up these issues that make me angry, I'm being gaslighted because I'm angry. But one of the things that I was very clear about is that anger is what fuels my work because of what is happening in society. And if you're not angry, then there's a problem. But what I will not accept is for that anger to be used as an identifier of who I am, because I'm a complex human being who feels a range of emotions, who comes in with their own intellectual capabilities. And for you to see me through a very narrow lens, I will not let that happen.
Mm. And you're so right, because I mean, that is what I think about a lot, when I hear angry Black women. I'm just like, do you know the very many things that we have, like, or the very many reasons we have to be angry? Like, I'm not surprised that we are angry. There's a lot that we have to deal with. And I think that's a frustrating thing about the stereotype, because it enters the room before you, so even when you are approaching it very calmly, you are approaching it very rationally, because the stereotype is already there. Anything that you say is already seen through that lens of, oh, here come the emotions, oh, here come the angry Black woman again, which, whew, so frustrating. Luleka, in your experience sort of entering the working world, did you have any sort of similar experiences? Was there a certain way that you had to be, or you had to carry yourself in the different working environments?
Yes, I just love what Malibu was saying, especially at the end when she spoke about her being a human being, that is complex and has, various emotions. I think we're basically here in this room in order to establish a new way of thinking, a new mindset in people. And that's the reason why we're busting a stereotype, because it's about us getting to the place where I need you to understand that our humanity is literally similar. Like, I need you to get to that place of familiarity when it comes to me, the Black woman. And unfortunately, it's like we enter into spaces where we actually have to do that. Why? It's like our question as a woman of color is, why should I come into the room to come and explain myself in that type of way? Because when I entered into the workspace, which was like literally more than 10 years ago, you can tell that there is an air about just women of color in general, but especially, Black women coming into the workspace. And, we are so empowered. You know how we are when you are young and we want to learn, and we're just like coming in with this big fat attitude of, oh, I want to be great. But then there are others around you who come in with systems in place in their minds, in their mindsets, which haven't been broken down. And you now then engage with it and you interact with it. And now it's like, oh, okay, I'm coming into this, you know? And Malib was 100% right. We have a lot to be angry about, but the world doesn't believe it. That's the thing. The world doesn't believe that we have things to be mad about, you know, and certain injustices to be mad about. So I've worked in different type of spaces where it was actually a lot of women in a company, a lot of them not Black women. And you get into boardrooms, and even in those spaces, it doesn't even have to be male. You are literally then looked at as, I'm here, you're here. It will always be the case. And if you try to, you know, erupt, essentially, you know, there's a level of control that is expected. There is an expectation of control in workspaces where it's like, you must keep it together, CC, you know? And I think it's a little bit problematic when you're trying to navigate your way, and you're even looking up to certain people, you know, you're looking up to certain ladies, and you're seeing them, you know, how they are and how assertive they are, and they just like, as managers, they're like, no here, yes here, you know, their yes is their yes, they know is they know, and you want to be that. But the minute you try, it's like, no, why is she getting all sassy? Oh, that word. I heard it so many times, the sassy, you know. Oh, she's such a sassy little young one. And it's offensive in a meeting, but you don't say that, I'm offended by what you just said. What do you mean I'm sassy? Because when you do it, it's fine. But when I do it, it's not fine. So those are the spaces that I've found myself in where I had to swallow an offense in the middle of meetings. And it didn't, as I said, it didn't have to be men who did it, you know. So those are the places I found myself in, you know, where you're told you are being too much, but really I'm just being human. It's me, and it's behavior that I've seen in others, you know, who are not reprimanded in the same way we are.
Mm, man, I'm gonna bring Kavini in because I'd like to hear more actually about the work that Boss Babe does, you know, as a platform for empowerment for women. Could you tell us a bit more about the work that Boss Babe does, Boss Babe South Africa?
Sure. So Boss Babes of South Africa is a digital empowerment platform that aims to celebrate authentic, powerful, and multifaceted women of South Africa. I really created this platform following quite a few disempowering experiences, very much of what we, Malebo and Luleka, have touched on as well. And I think there was a need for me to kind of create a safe space for women to have these kind of deep conversations, and also to extend the seat at the table, because often it's a fight to even get a seat at the table. And why should it be? Because often, you know, we have the right merit or qualification, whatever else it may be. So Boss Babes South Africa was really born out of very much what our speakers, Malebo and Luleka, have, you know, detailed. Elements of tone policing, elements of, you know, being the angry Black woman, whereas other people are seen as, you know, being passionate. So they're passionate, but you're angry. And you know, seeing it happen numerous times, and also seeing it happen with not just me, but, you know, women that were really close to me, experiencing the very same thing, that like when we go for dinner, that is pretty much what everyone at the table would be talking about. And it kind of became something that, and I'm glad we're having this conversation, that, you know, it can't be ignored, because it very much introduces you before you even, as you've mentioned, enter a room. And I think it's just this kind of disparate way of the treatment of people, you know, that made me reflect and say, let me create this platform of power where, most importantly, at Boss Babes of South Africa, you're allowed to be your authentic self. Because that is, like for me, that is the ultimate, you know, goal of being alive. And that is the ultimate goal of having a purpose and following your calling. It's quite pointless if you can't actually leverage your authentic self, because there's a way that you need to speak, there's a way that you need to look. The tone of your voice is often more controversial than what you actually say. And that was really some of, you know, the real life experiences that myself and people really close to me had gone through. And Boss Babes is really about, changing narratives, very much this narrative that we're talking about here, and breaking barriers through having this amazing community of powerful women that we have. And we have live shows every Thursday where we go live with a powerful South African trailblazing woman, and they break down these type of stereotypes, these barriers. They tell us about their painful struggles that they had to overcome to actually achieve the level of success that they have today. So yeah, that's pretty much Boss Babes of South Africa in a nutshell. More importantly, the reason why it was created was very much aligned to the conversation that we're having today.
Definitely sounds like a platform I will be checking out very soon. Thank you so much for creating that space. I think we definitely need more and more spaces like that. And for me, I think it's even moved from like wanting a seat at the table to actually be like, babes, let's build our own damn table actually, and let's just do what we need to do, because like that table is also the problem. So thank you so much for that work that you're doing. And I like that you've mentioned, the safe space and creating that. Malebo or Luleka, have there been moments where you felt like I'm in a space where I feel empowered, where I feel like actually, yes, my opinion matters. My sassiness is not a bad thing. It's welcomed. And I'm asking this because I want to really start looking at what makes this space so welcoming, as we all endeavor to build these safe spaces, for women. Can you remember a moment? I see, my label, you are nodding. Can you tell us about, a time where you did feel like, yes, I may be angry, but it's not a bad thing, or I'm not seen as the angry Black woman, but maybe I'm also passionate because, that something can be extended to me too.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we must press is that these tropes, these stereotypes are used to gaslight us, to shame us, to silence us, right? And so they also, and Toni Morrison also says that the very function of racism and whatever ism is to distract us, right? Because we're constantly trying to explain ourselves, we're constantly trying to say, no, look, I'm not angry, I am this, right? And this distracts us from actually doing the work that we need to do. So what I learned earlier on is that it's this idea of the oppositional gaze, like to use that very stereotype against, to say, I'm going to own this and I'm going to carry it with power because it's not my job to educate you, to remove that stereotype from your head. And there's this like delusion that we go into the corporate spaces with, this white feminism that we go into the corporate spaces with, that we're going to break glass ceilings and we're going to change the system from inside. And I realized when I was in the corporate sector that I am not going to change the system from the inside, because it drove my mental health suffered, and I didn't have the words at that time to say I have anxiety, I'm neurodivergent. I just thought there was something wrong with me, because they kept on reminding me that I needed to be grateful because of quota systems and maybe I'm not meant to be there. And so when I resigned from the corporate sector altogether, I was like, capitalism, I'm not going to fight it from within, I'm going to fight it from out. And so there was this thing that I failed my community, because maybe I'm first generation or second generation to get this opportunity, but there's this power in resistance, right? And I don't think that I have felt safe in any systematic place that is built within society, because a lot of the things are so underpinned by neoliberalism and capitalism. But I think where I felt space is who is around me at the time. So resigning from my job, I had to figure out how I'm going to get within the activist space and how I'm going to get within different kind of spaces where I wanted to fight this capitalism from the outside. And I found that being with Black women, wherever you are, being with Black women, even within the corporate space, I went into academia, being with Black women, creating safe spaces where you can debrief. So we created, like Boss Babes, we created a space called Lady Leader, and we were playing with the words, right? In terms of a lady supposed to behave a certain way. A lady can never be a leader because you're so, you're supposed to be this dainty, feminine kind of caricature. And we created this space where we wanted women, queer, non-binary people to come together and actually debrief, become who they are, just be like, just be. And I think we had to be really intentional about creating those spaces and dealing with our mental health, talking about self-care, talking about how to show up, talking about just being kind to yourself, because the systems that exist out there, we're fighting all the time. We are angry. We might not be angry Black women, but we are angry. But we were intentional about creating spaces within ourselves. I mean, you, Kakaza, you created a great space for artists, and many people would be like, it was for poets, but no, I'm a writer, and you created a safe space for me to come into your organization, and for me to share about my work in however I showed up, right? And I think those kind of spaces have nurtured me and have given me hope that when you have these spaces, they give you that strength for when you go out there and fight, the fight is, you can't carry that fight.
Mm. Oh man, thank you, thank you. I mean, it's nice to know that the work that we do, in our very many spaces is so meaningful. And I think you're touching on my next question, just around there's two ways to respond to this, right? One way is then to just decide, okay, you know what, let me just do what the system wants, status quo it out, and just be quiet, maybe, or just yeah, try figure out what shape this thing wants me to be in, and then I squeeze myself into it. Or there's like the one just to be like, that's not the game we're going to play here. Think what you want about me. I don't mind, But I think that second one takes so much from you, and is so difficult. And it comes after having to speak to yourself a lot, And Kavini, I'm going to throw this to you and then come to Lulak about it, just to say like, one, survival tips or survival mechanisms. If I'm a woman in the workplace and this moment is happening, are there some things that you can tell me that I should remember in that moment? Yeah, just how do we not have to always squeeze ourselves into whatever shape it is, but where do I draw this courage from to actually say, excuse me, I got some things to say about what you've just said.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really powerful question. And my best advice is not to respond in the moment, because I think you're filled with so much of emotion. There's so many things going on, that sometimes it's good just to literally walk out of the situation, think about it for a day. Speak to your friends, speak to, in many cases, many of us have had to undergo a fair amount of therapy, to actually bring ourselves back to ourselves. So speak to your therapist, and make sure even the therapist that you're going to, I think a very important point is to make sure that they also understand this concept very well, that your therapist is well aligned with what is sort of happening in the environment. Because I think that was some of the mistakes I made earlier on in trying to address this earlier on. And yeah, I think, after speaking to a few people, come back and find a nice way to articulate what it is. And I mean, it probably never will be well received. But I think the liberating feeling that you have after being able to speak your voice, sometimes it could be, putting it down in an email, because that then can't show you as being angry. Well, hopefully not too angry. So yeah, I think there's different mechanisms to kind of just consider before responding. And yeah, I think also, having a circle outside of the environment has been really, really powerful. So surrounding yourself, very much like Luleka and Malebo have mentioned, surrounding yourself with like-minded women who are probably going through the same sort of challenges, really makes all the difference, because the insight that they're going to even give you is relatable, as opposed to sometimes trying to reach out, to people who just don't understand this dynamic. I think it's just helpful to have people outside of the space who understand it, who get it, who are your support system. And also to like what I've done with Boss Babes is really, this is something that I'm so passionate about. And nothing stops you from building an online community. Like literally, it is not illegal to build an online community, irrespective of, what your other obligations may be. So I think it's always, it's a channel. I love social media for the fact that it allows everyone to have a voice. It allows everyone to have an equal voice. And yeah, I think nothing stops you from going out there and creating your kind of movement or something that aligns with you. And I always say it takes just one voice to create a movement, because that's pretty much how Boss Babes was born over 14 months ago. And we're now sitting at over 20,000 followers across Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn.
Oh, amazing, which I guess, I mean, speaks to the need, for spaces like that. And I think, yeah, even when I started out in my career, I do remember, yeah, also just being told around, don't always respond in the moment. It's okay to just be like, I'm going to take a moment to think about it, and then to come back. I think it also just has helped me formulate what my response is as well,
Mm.
and be able to clearly state, what it is I feel. Luleka, for you, what are some of the things you tell yourself in your mind, the conversation you have to have with self when that happens? I don't know about you. I speak to myself a lot. Me and myself have very many conversations about many things.
Yeah, I think the difficulty with workspaces is that there's a general fear, and look, it can be with anyone, not just with black women, but there's just a general fear of, if I literally reveal everything that I'm feeling right now, I'm gonna get fired. So there's just a general feeling of losing of employment. I think it's just generally there. And I think when that fear overpowers you, it puts you in a space of not having any confidence to voice out anything at all, depending on how much fear there actually is, as opposed to having maybe like a faith to just be like, you know what, I'm just going to speak up and just go for it. But also, I do believe what Kavini was saying about tact, but I don't necessarily think that all things need to be sugar coated. To be like, oh, let me say this in a nice way, or let me think about it, or write it down, write different types of sentences for me to say this thing. I don't think it really needs to be that deep. I think honesty is important in the workplace. And how it's received is how it's received. If somebody comes and takes it with offense, literally, because some people just grab an offense, they call it catching a feeling. you know they're just grabbing an offense from nowhere, even though it's not necessarily your intention. But I think the biggest thing is coming in with just honesty and not having like the fear, but also evaluating in yourself to be like, is what I'm saying true? Is what I'm saying valid? Or am I just grabbing it from the air? And that those are the questions that I would that I always like ask myself. Like, if I want to challenge a certain thing, or if I want to sort of respond to something that I feel like was just a bit off in a meeting, in a boardroom, in a whatever, then I have to evaluate, is what I'm addressing true? Is what I'm addressing like valid? Maybe I need to ask a question. Like, did you really mean it like that, or is it me? Because sometimes I think questions have to be asked, instead of saying, well, you spoke like that, clearly you don't like black women, clearly you are this, clearly you are that. Then then now already you start to come off as, oh, she's angry. Oh, she's angry. But then sometimes it just requires a question. Like, yesterday you said this. Is this how you actually meant it? Because I took it as XYZ. So I think it's how you phrase the conversation when you're now coming back and you're responding to the situation at hand.
Mm. Malabo, just mentioned something here around, it's just like the emotions. And actually, I think there's so much work that we do in sanitizing the workspace, and not having any emotions, as if we aren't human beings, even at work. And do you view this stereotype of the angry Black woman as maybe another way of policing women, of silencing women, by bringing this emotion thing in? And for you, what is the place of emotion in the workplace? You're still on mute.
I mean, we human, and emotion is a part of us. I don't know how many emotions we have besides the most obvious ones, right? Like, I don't know when they say someone is emotionless, what that means, because you're still showing an emotion. You know, like this, like you're a bit cold, you're emotionless. I mean, I think that is an emotion, and psychology does say that there are various numbers of emotions that we can show. So, like I say, that stereotype is actually just exists to shame you, to shut you up, and to gaslight us, to have us also start doubting who we are and how we show up in the world. And like the example that I made in the beginning, where whatever you say, however you say it, I mean, there's certain ways that we show up, maybe like I use hand gestures, or I'm loud or whatnot, and you'd be told that calm down, you're bringing emotions into this. And I'm like, okay, so there are certain kind of emotions that are allowed because we were laughing at the beginning of this meeting. And if I remember last week, you were upset because the rand plummeted because of something. You were really upset, and when you were upset, nobody said, hey, hold on, don't bring emotions into this. It was your right to be upset, because you are seen as somebody who's passionate, somebody who takes charge of their work. But when you just show any kind of emotion, there's this idea of hold on, stop being emotional. So I actually, like I said, I follow this idea of the oppositional gaze, where it really matters not to me how you perceive me. And it is not my job to try and change the stereotypes that you have of me. I do not respond to oppression in that way. It's not my job to educate you. My job is, the only work that I will do is I will do the liberatory work around people who look like me, and I will put in the work that will create safe spaces and that will create consciousness of who we are. And so whether I'm loud, whether I'm angry, and you tell me that I need to be less loud and less angry, I'm not going to do that. I will allow you to sit with that stereotype that you have of me. And what I will fight is the injustices that comes out of those kind of notions that you have of me. And also, and also there's this, like I said, I was brought in a mentor. And most of the time they bring in somebody who looks like you, like a Black woman who looks like you, who will come and who will say to you, you need to calm down. Don't be too loud. Your generation like to be loud. It's just like when you're in the house, hantate, when a man does this, you need to be strategic, make him feel like he's still in charge, So this is the way that you also do your work. So you need to be strategic. And I think like when we use tact, when we use the words like tact and strategy and think before you speak, we have to be very careful that we are also not policing ourselves and we're not self-censoring ourselves, right? Because there's also this idea that how you show up is not professional. And for me, I've always said, when I think about what I'm going to say, because sometimes speaking in the moment is what is needed, because my life is not a theory, my life is not some literature, my life is a lived experience. And whatever it is that you're giving to me, when I feel like I'm being prejudiced against, there's no explanation for that, because I'm experiencing it. And I think we need to sit with that. And if I respond in the moment because I'm feeling discriminated against, there is no other way to express what I'm feeling. I can't go back home and calm down. So I think like when we say the word tact and the way that don't speak in the moment, I think it's important to add a little bit and say, we should not be censoring ourselves. I mean, there is, I think tact and not speaking in the moment is self-care, right? It is self-care. When you choose to not respond in the moment, is a form of self-care to say, I'm not going to be part of this because it's going to be so violent. But let it not be because you are now self-censoring yourself to fit in some box that is called professional behavior. Yeah.
And it's so funny because as you're speaking about, like being loud and very passionate, I think of our staff meetings. So as Luleka has said, our our company is mostly Black women, and there's a certain freedom that comes with that, and yeah, lots of emotions. I'm actually gonna go over to Luleka because I'm quite interested, especially also maybe like looking at this current workspace that we're in that allows for a very passionate exchange, and maybe previous ones that didn't. For you, the role or the room for emotion in the workplace, where do you place emotion in the workplace?
Sure. Oh my gosh. Malibu just spoke about like this thing of, being deemed unprofessional. And I've thought about it in our current workplace where really there is like a major freedom to be who you are. Um, and I think the only thing that I would definitely say though is that there are sensitivities to certain things, and Malibu might see it differently, but I definitely see that there are like levels of sensitivity where we can be loud, we can be this, we can be that in a staff meeting, for example, and our personalities most definitely shine. It does not matter if you're loud or if you're quiet, you know. There's this, I don't know how to even describe it, like this witty exchange of like commentary, people dragging each other in a meeting, and then there are personalities who might be very sensitive to, that type of thing, they don't want to be made fun of, because there's certain triggers. And I think those things we need to always keep in mind, that even if you're bursting, in your freedom and in who you are, that there's certain levels of like sensitivities. And then in terms of like being like getting to a point of like being unprofessional in a way, it's just, you see, our perceptions of unprofessional may be different. I might have been like, oh no, that was fine. And then somebody else might have been like, no, in the workplace, no, So now it's like, where do you draw the line? What's the line of now we have crossed into unprofessional? So I think it's also what the company establishes for themselves as that, being that. It's part of that whole culture to just be like, the line is here, because if we say that there's no line, then we're allowing for anything. We're allowing for subordinates to speak to CEOs and stuff meeting in any type of way, and even cuss words and all of that stuff. And then it's like, whoa, we've never worked in this type of space before. But like this is the thing. It's an established culture that the company has. But I'm not definitely not saying that people should like put themselves in some sort of a box to just be like, I need to keep it here, keep it here, keep it here, keep it here. But yeah, in working in the environment that I do, it's beautiful to see, it's beautiful to experience. There are certain places where it's like your emotion is a bit much, but I feel like those instances are dealt with immediately, to just be like, if I'm always this amazing and happy, it doesn't mean that I'm always this amazing and happy. If I need to break down tomorrow, let me break down. If in that moment I'm truly truly angry about something, let me be angry about that something. Yeah. Instead of saying it's an emotional thing, but yeah, that's where I stand on that.
And it's so crazy actually, to think about, like, bringing emotions to the workspace, because I remember there was a meeting I was leading, and I mean, it was just a really bad time in South Africa. Another woman had been raped, in a post office. Like, it just, it felt so ridiculous to be able to, or to be expected to come to work and just act like the world around you is not burning down. And I remember, and Shaman, I really must really appreciate, the rest of the team for allowing me that moment to actually say, you know what, never mind, this meeting doesn't have an agenda. I'm actually just going to sit here and openly speak about how it feels like to be a Black woman trying to like just get to work and get home. And I literally broke down and I was crying in that meeting. But to be able to work in an environment that allowed for that, was, yeah, maybe something I took for granted in that moment. But I think I'm really thinking back at it right now, and that really was a powerful moment. And I think a moment that also connected all of us, because all of us were able to speak. It was also really amazing to hear the men in the office as well be able to speak as well, just around how they are experiencing this reality as well. And I think that's the nice thing about um, safe spaces for women, they actually allow everybody to be free. It's not just like it's a safe space for us and everybody else who's not doesn't feel safe, but you actually do find, and we've spoken to some of the men in our company as well, who've actually just been like, they've never worked in an environment like this, and although it might be a bit of a culture shock in the beginning, I think they find a certain freedom for themselves as well. And I'm also just reminded of like one of the modules in this leadership course I'm doing, just around leading with emotion, that emotional intelligence. And I think that this is really where it all comes to say emotions are really important. They drive us. We actually we don't exist outside of them. So to imagine that there's this workplace that doesn't have them is quite ridiculous to think of. But I guess it's just that intelligence. It's the how we use these emotions to drive forward what it is that we're trying to do. As a way of wrapping up this really awesome conversation, I must say thank you, ladies, so much. Like, yeah, I'm having so many moments where I'm just like, oh my gosh, yes, that was a note. That was a note. Um, as we are trying to build these safe spaces that not only support Black women, but also encourage us, to grow from strength to strength. I'm really keen to explore and to understand what does that look like for you. So Kavini, I'm going to start with you. If I'm saying I want to build a safe space for Black women to work and to flourish, what does that look like for you? What does that space have to have, if I'm honest about it?
So I think just the ability to start by, they say sometimes you can listen to someone, but you don't hear them. So, I want to be heard. I want my voice to matter. I want my qualifications to matter. I don't want, because often I find, or I feel like the glass ceilings are not glass ceilings. They feel like they steel ceilings sometimes. So that's what I want. I want those barriers to be broken. I want to have a real conversation about, my growth within an organization or whichever space it may be. And I want to be surrounded when I go to meetings. I want to look around the room and see people that look like me.
Mm.
And yeah, I think a combination of that is what creates a safe space. And I think just being open to being heard, being able to speak your authentic voice and be heard is just such a powerful feeling.
Mm. So I think it's quite interesting. I mean, it's not just about giving me a platform to speak, but actually listening, and to know that whatever it is that I'm saying actually has consequence or will actually be applied somewhere.
Yeah,
My
because it's like diversity and inclusion are these days buzzwords, right? Everyone's throwing them around. Diversity, inclusion, but it's also belonging is a big part of that. Because if you don't feel like you belong somewhere, then diversity and inclusion doesn't stand for much. You need to actually be feeling it. You need to be feeling that you're part of something. And yeah, there's a lot of work that goes into making people feel welcome.
True. Malebo, for you, what does and I mean maybe this can also go back to the work that you do with Lady Leader, but when we say we are creating these safe spaces for Black women, what do they have to look like? Please unmute yourself.
Yes. I mean, come on. It's now almost June 2021 and we're still dealing with unmute yourself. um, I'm thinking of what's her name? Solange's song, Things I Imagine, because
Oh, is
it's
this why
really
you were
just
dancing?
imagining what.
I can see you doing this.
Yes, because I'm dancing as you're talking, I'm like listening to the song playing, in heavenly backgrounds that, it's like imagining yourself liberatory space. Like what would a space for you that's full of liberation, what does that look like? And I think it goes back to what you said earlier on when we say we should not aspire to be part of the table or getting a space in this table, but we should create our own kind of not even a table. Why are we creating a table? Why isn't it a circle? Create our own kind of organizations, our own kind of models. There've been a lot of Black women that I look up to that have created even like an economic model, and like, what would an economic model where there's income that's able to support multiple kind of families? What would it look like in terms of the structure and its function? Because when you're in a corporate space, how cutthroat is, what's the bottom line. But what if the bottom line, are the staff members? What if mental health is taken seriously and people get mental health days? What if we we start time, we start work at a certain time, and those kind of things that you allow that are seen as impossible. When you sit here and you're like, oh, I just wish we were not driven into this grind culture and we were given some space to just rest. What if your company says at 1 p.m. everybody rests? There's little rooms in there. Everybody go and take a 30-minute nap and then have your lunch and then come back. Those kind of spaces that you imagine to be quite liberatory. But I think for me, what I think about when I think of safe spaces is to reverse this grind culture that we exist in, this culture of that we are magic, that we do not break, that we are constantly excellent, to allow us to just be and to take care of our mental health, because a lot of times the grind culture can really drive you, it can really drive your mental health to the pits. So for me, is about being in an environment where my mental health is cared for, where rest is important, and where development is not about GDP or money, where it's really about human development. How is the human, because once you take care of the human needs, like basic needs, I think that's when we go back to Ubuntu, when we think about Ubuntu, when we actually build everything off the premise of Ubuntu, when there's lots of collective work, when we think of the collective and not the individual. I really think, it's a very broad answer, but I think it's about what we can imagine into existence. And I think a lot of people already do that. Like I said with you, with word and sound, right? It's such a great model that brings artists, that puts artists on stage and says, nobody knows me, I've never been exposed, but I'm going to be on the stage and people are going to know who I am, in the spirit of love, and they're going to purchase my work. Those kind of models that exist in that way. I think that's how, for me, even if it's not seen in a very market related sense, I think those are the kind of models that I imagine to be safe for us. Yeah.
So after this, I'm definitely going to go and check out Boss Babes SA. But at the same time, I'm going to be listening to Solange and that song specifically, because what I really like is the work of reimagining completely. I think, and COVID, I think, has really forced many companies, to do that, to actually say, who said 9 to 5 has to be it? Who said, like, leaving your home or whatnot has to be it? And I think I'm interested in doing more of that reimagining work, more of that, let's throw this rule book right out the window, actually, and just start from scratch, and to build rules from like our perspective, to say, actually, I'm a mom, and my child actually wakes up maybe at about 8:30 or so. So can I put it in my calendar that at 8:30 there's no meetings because I'm actually dealing with nappy changes and whatnot, and that shouldn't take away from the fact that, yes, I can still run this company right after I'm finished changing this nappy. So I think it's just about reimagining and building the world from our need, and not trying to fit ourselves into what has been built, because it wasn't built for us and it wasn't built by us either, and it's not surprising that it doesn't work for us. Lulaka, for you, in closing up, what does a safe space, when you enter a safe space as a Black professional, what would you like that space to look like?
Look, I feel like mine is very generic. It's not even about being a Black woman, but guys, I need a space where people can cry. Because as adults, guys, adulting is hard. Number one, you know, for all of us. And I think some women go home and there's children and then they also can't cry there, you know? So I'm just like, guys, if I'm having a situation in a meeting, you know, and it makes me emotional, let me cry, but also let it never ever be used against me. Let it never ever be brought up in another follow-up meeting to just be like, or even in meetings where I'm not there to just be like, oh, you know how she always cries. She's so emotional. Like let it never be used against me, because really, guys, as adults, number one, it's hard. Just working that grind that Malibu spoke about, it's very hard living in that type of world. And always like constantly trying to keep up with it. And then also there's the pressures, you know, internally, you know, in work environments, and there's pressures even at home. I mean, there's people who come to work, you never even know that they possibly going through a divorce or whatever it is that may be happening. And the additional grind pressure is a lot. So I just feel like spaces of crying, guys, people must not be waiting for 5 to be like, I'm gonna cry in the car. No, like let people be what needs to be. And literally, yeah, but never ever use it against them. Never ever make decisions about, you know, them as a professional, an individual, you know, based on the fact that they had that emotional moment. Hey, we need it. We need to cry. Actually, we just need to cry. That's
We've
me.
all cried in the car. We've all cried in the
All
car.
of us. Like you're waiting. Your emotions are here, but you're waiting for 5. Like it's really, really that bad. So yeah, we need the space. We need the
And
space.
that's so crazy
Yeah.
because while you're waiting for 5 o'clock, even this email that you're sending right now, like your mind is not even in it. Like you're lying to yourself about where you're at, which is why you can't actually fully be even in whatever place you're trying to be, you know? So I think, yeah,
Yeah.
just being able to show up as who I am, you know, and who I am changes, you know, from minute to minute. And sometimes I'm Kagaza
Mm.
who had a really, really tough day. And yeah, maybe I just need to just, you know, shed a young tear and we move on, you know.
Let it out. Yes.
Before I let you ladies go, I do want to hear Malebo, where can people get a hold of this lovely book? If you could also tell them a bit about it. What is it about? And you know, why is it a thing that people should go and read?
Well, it's a African feminist text. It details a journey of a Black woman in terms of, you know, just what it means to be a Black woman in South Africa who engages with these multiple power structures, and how to get to a place of self-determinism using African feminism as theory and social constructivism to explain everything. The point of the extent complex theories and to write them in an accessible manner, so that this is a conversation that's had, because usually a lot of work in academia can be super exclusionary. And yeah, so for me, it was basically breaking down those barriers and having a feminist conversation using myself as a framework, right? So it's like autoethnography, memoir kind of writing style as reclamation. And I'm really blessed because this book came out in 2017 and it's still, you know, within the hearts of people. That's such a blessing. You can get it. I prefer people going to indie bookstores to buy it. You can get it from most indie bookstores. You can buy it from my brilliant publisher's website, blackbirdbooks.africa. You purchase it from there, but most bookstores have it. And yeah, and so just the last thing that I wanted to say, you know, sometimes when we I'm sorry I didn't say this earlier on, but sometimes we tend to be really hard on people who choose not to fight in the corporate space, right? And we should all understand that we're not in the same situation. I might be privileged enough to resign. Somebody else does not have that privilege to speak up, to walk away. And so we should, instead of being hard on them, we should show compassion, and those are the people that we should have the, you know, the patience to teach. Yeah, so that's one thing that I wanted to add. But yeah, thank you so much for having me here.
Thanks for adding that. Kovini, you spoke earlier about your weekly live conversations. Can you tell us a bit more about that and some of the topics that you're covering? And next week, Thursday, have you got your guest lined up for next week?
Sure, yes, we do have a guest lined up for next week. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you I know who it is now. We usually have a Friday team meeting. But yeah, all the information can be found on our Instagram page at Boss Babes of South Africa. And to be a part of the Boss Babe community, you can also register on our website, www.bossbabesofsouthafrica.co.za. Click register, and pretty much you'll be part of our mailers. You'll be part of the upcoming events. We've got quite a few events coming up in June as well, to really collaborate and bring together women to have, empowered conversations. And it really is open to all women of South Africa, all women in the Johannesburg area. So yeah, I'd also like to personally at this point invite you guys, if you're available for the next few events, for Kaza, Luleka, and Malebo. I'd really love to meet you guys in person, and hopefully continue this really powerful conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. And thank you for extending that invite as well. Definitely will be checking Boss Babes out. Thank you, ladies, for today's conversation, man. Like every time we put these together, I kind of have an idea of where we're going to take the conversation, and then the people we bring into the room take it to the next level. And for that, I really must thank the producer of the show. Like I just had an idea of, hey, I want to try and do this thing. And Apiwe has really brought it to life in a way that's really amazing, pulling in amazing guests for me to speak to and really helping me in contextualizing, the conversation and what I want to do with it. So a massive shout out to Apiwe Mame and all of the work that he does with this one. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have an awesome weekend. And yeah, we will keep connecting with each other and making sure that we are building the kind of safe spaces that we want to be working in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.